and welcome to Signage and the MUTCD, brought to you by the South Carolina LTAP. I'll be your instructor for this webinar. My name is Todd Morrison, and we're going to go over today the MUTCD and signage. Now, first we'll talk about what is the MUTCD. That's the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. We'll also cover when does it apply. Next, how do we use it and why do we use it? We'll also take a little bit of a look at proper use and installation of signs. You see a picture here of the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. The acronym is MUTCD, and that's what we commonly refer to it as. This is the federal document for all traffic control devices. It's put out by the FHWA, and each state is required to adopt it or to write something in substantial conformance to it. If you'd like to receive a copy of it, there's a website here for you, mutcd.fhwa.dot.gov. Feel free to go there. You can get a PDF of this document free of charge. And when we look at that acronym, to me, the biggest part of that acronym is the letter U. That stands for uniform. And that's one of the reasons that we have the MUTCD is we want all of our signs, all of our striping, all of our pavement markings to look the same, no matter which city you're in, which county, or which state that you're in. We have a consistent shape, size, color for all of our signs, all of our pavement markings, and then standard locations as well. The reason for this is it allows the public to understand what we would like for them to do much easier and much better, much quicker. And those quicker decisions, that reduction in confusion, means that really we have a reduction in crashes or collisions as well. And we found out that the MUTCD really is a book that is talking about highway safety and efficiency. Imagine a world where you didn't have the MUTCD. If each city got to decide what they wanted to use, then your city may say, you know what, for our stop signs, we're going to make those octagonal in shape, white letters on a red background with the word stop in the middle. Everybody in your city gets used to that, no problem. But then when they go to the next city over, maybe they've decided they're going to use circular signs that are white letters on a purple background for their stop sign. Or maybe they're pentagon shaped, black letters on a fluorescent yellow-green background. Each time you go to a different city, county, or state, you'd have to figure out, what are they trying to tell you? It'd be very confusing. And that's one of the reasons that we have the MUTCD. It's why the FHWA requires that each state adopt it. And the MUTCD applies to all roads that are open to public travel. That is state routes, county roads, city streets, even those private roads, those private developments. If they're open to public travel, then they have to follow the minimum guidelines that we find in the MUTCD. The only exceptions given are the parking areas and their driving aisles. That means if I have two shopping places next to each other, adjacent to each other in a big shopping center, then those roads that are connecting those two shopping places have to follow the MUTCD. So how about this road? This is a very rural road in South Carolina. This is a county road. So does the MUTCD apply to this road? And the answer is yes, absolutely. It's open to public travel, therefore the MUTCD applies to it. As a matter of fact, this particular road, this type of road, a county road with low volume, even has its own section of the MUTCD, Part 5. When you go to the website, mutcd.fhwa.dot.gov, you'll see there's several chapters or parts of the MUTCD. And as you get that booklet, you download the PDF and you begin to look at it, I want to give you a little bit of insight into how it's written. You're going to see three types of text. You're going to see bold, italics, and normal text. The bold text is going to have the verb shall. That's going to be called a standard. And that is something that you absolutely have to do. It's a mandatory condition. There's no leeway given unless you're a registered engineer. In that particular case, if you're utilizing engineering judgment, you could override the standard, but otherwise, you have to follow it. And what you're going to find is that we engineers as a group are very conservative. We're very unlikely to override the standard. It would take some overwhelming evidence or a very unique situation before we would. The next type of text you see is guidance. Guidance is going to be in italics. It's going to have the verb should. And that's something that you should do unless there is a very good reason not to. And that reason needs to be on the order of magnitude of engineering judgment or an engineering study. The next type of text that you're going to see is option. That's going to be normal text. It's going to have the verb may. And when you see that, it's truly optional. You can do that or not. It's up to you. You'll also see support statements that are written in normal text as well. Let me give you some examples of these. This is standard. It's in bold. It has the verb shall. It's section 2B.10. So that's part 2 or chapter 2. And they have a 2A, a 2B, a 2C, and then a 2B.01, 2B.02. It's all broken down into sections. There's even paragraph numbers. Maybe on the left-hand side, you can see a small 0 and a 1. This is paragraph 1. And that way you and I could look at any section of the MUTCD together if we were on the phone or just reference it via email. Let's check this one out. It says the stop sign shall be installed on the near side of the intersection on the right-hand side of the approach to which it applies. And all it's really saying is that if we have a stop sign up, it goes on the right-hand side of the road just before the intersection. That's the near side of the intersection. Where it does not go is across the road like they've done in this photo. Now, if you want a second sign to draw more attention, then you can install one on the left-hand side, but it does not go across the intersection. In this particular case, someone unfamiliar with the roadway, if they just saw that one stop sign in the center, they might go all the way out into that intersection before they stopped, and then they could get hit by oncoming traffic. The main road in this picture is 55 miles an hour, so it would not be pleasant. That's a standard. Anytime you see that, be thinking, I've got to do that. The next type of text that you see is italics. It's going to have the verb should. We talked about that. It's a guidance statement. And as you're looking at this, perhaps you've read it, but really all it says, I'll sum it up for you, is that if we mount a sign on the back of a stop sign, then that sign on the back of the stop sign should stay within the edges of the stop sign. That's the most important shape that we have, that octagonal shape. If you're meeting minimum sign sizes and the minimum size sign that you put on the back of the stop sign escapes the edges of it, then the way that you get around that is to upgrade the size of the stop sign. Take it from 30 by 30 to 36 by 36, or from 36 by 36 to 48 by 48. On the left, you see an example of how you would do that. On the right, you see an example of what not to do. The shape of that stop sign is obscured by the sign behind it. Then we have options. This is normal text. Has the verb may, something you can do or not do. It's really up to you. So let's say that we have a one-lane bridge, a bridge that's maybe 15 feet in width, and we only have room for one lane of traffic at a time on it. That means somebody has to yield to oncoming traffic. And this says if we have that yield sign up, we can place a to oncoming traffic plaque underneath it. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about compliance dates, because when you get this MUTCD downloaded, you're likely to see signs that maybe don't look exactly like what you have installed. And that could be because you have an older version of that sign up. That's what I'm showing you in this particular slide. At the bottom left, you see the school bus stop ahead sign. That particular sign is from the 2003 MUTCD, not the current edition, the 2009. On the right-hand side, we have the 2009 MUTCD standard sign for a school bus stop ahead. It went to a symbol. The color changed from the standard yellow to fluorescent yellow-green, a special color reserved for schools. Now, if you notice that, and you've got a bunch of these school bus stop ahead word signs out, like you see on the left, or when the 2009 MUTCD was fully adopted by South Carolina in 2011, did you have to go out there right away and change out the school bus stop ahead signs and put the new one up? And the answer is no. As long as that sign was still good, it wasn't faded out to where you couldn't see it, it wasn't damaged or knocked down, then you could leave that old sign out there until it had really lived out its useful life. But if you were coming in to do new installations, replacements, rebuilds, then whatever sign you put up past the acceptance date of the 2009 MUTCD, which was in 2011 for South Carolina, you had to put up the new sign, the one that you see on the right, the symbol of the school bus. And that's true for everything in the MUTCD except a few items. There's a few items that are so important from a safety standpoint, they have compliance dates. And it says that everything you have out there in the field needs to be retrofitted or replaced to meet those compliance dates. And those are contained in table I-2. That's the introductory part of the MUTCD. And I encourage you to check that out. There's only a few of those. But look at that. As long as it's not on that compliance list, though, that sign could stay out there until it's outlived its useful life. In addition to the MUTCD, we also have the Standard Highway Signs Manual. And that's found on the website with the MUTCD as well. And there you're going to see a list of signs, really the diagrams on how you print those signs out. It gives you all the dimensions and a few other options. In addition, South Carolina has written a supplement to the MUTCD, the South Carolina DOT. I encourage you to go to their website, scdot.org, and check that out. Download that. As a city or a county, you would be allowed to use those signs as well. On the left-hand side, I'm showing you a couple of pictures of signs from the South Carolina MUTCD supplement. We've got a church warning sign and an evacuation route specifically for South Carolina. And our signs are classified in three categories: regulatory, warning, and guide. Each one of those has their own section. Regulatory signs are found in section 2B, warning signs primarily in 2C, and guide signs in 2D. So let's talk about those. Regulatory signs really tell the motorist about a traffic law or an ordinance, something that you could be given a ticket for. And they could be white letters on a red background, like the stop sign, the wrong way sign. They could also be black letters on a white background, like our speed limit signs that you see. And generally speaking, they're going to be rectangular in shape, with a long dimension being up and down. That's the regulatory signs found in 2B. We also have warning signs. They're found in part 2C. And here we're telling the public about curves coming up, intersections, maybe stops that are coming up for the traffic. There would be a stop ahead sign, steep grades, maybe roadway surface conditions like slippery when wet, or bridges freeze before the roadway, etc. Or it might be temporary traffic control, as you see on the right-hand side. All of these are warning signs. And generally speaking, they're going to be diamond in shape, but there's some exceptions. There's the railroad crossing sign that's circular, the no passing zone that is pennant shaped. At the top left of the drawing, you'll see the pentagon shaped school crossing assembly sign. And it has a different color too. It's fluorescent yellow-green. We mentioned that with the school bus stop ahead signs. And as you're looking at these warning signs, trying to decide whether you should install them or how you install them, I encourage you to become a student of the MUTCD and read. Each one of these warning signs will have a picture of it in the MUTCD. It'll show you what the standard should look like. It will also have words or verbiage, paragraphs that go with it. For example, the turn sign that you see, the one that has a 90-degree angle, the turn sign, is required to be used in advance of curves that have advisory speeds of 30 miles per hour or less. And that is if you're required to sign that change in the roadway coming up. So if your advisory speed for your curve, that's the black on yellow advisory speed plaque that you would post underneath this sign. If it is 30 miles per hour or less, then you're required to use the turn sign. It's a shall condition. If it is 35 or above, then you're required to use the curve sign that you see here at the bottom of this slide. On the outside of the curve, it may be optional, it might be recommended, or it might be required that you use a one direction large arrow sign. And there are some minimum heights for those. You could also use chevrons on the outside of curves. But again, when you have to use these, when it's recommended, so when it is a standard guidance or option, is given to you in the MUTCD. And you might notice that these chevrons are spaced fairly close together. Well, in years past, we wouldn't have used as many chevrons as we do today. If we decide to use chevrons, then there is a new chart that goes based upon the advisory speed. It gives us a set spacing for these, and it's much closer than what we would have had in the past. Those are the warning signs. Now let's talk about the guide signs. Guide signs really give the motorist information about what's coming up, locations, motorist services, emergency services, etc. And guide signs are going to use white letters on a green background for destinations or directions. When we're talking about cultural or recreational, historic, then it's going to be brown on a brown background with white letters. If we're talking about motorist services, then it's going to be white letters on a blue background. And those signs, by the way, generally speaking, are going to be rectangular in shape. And this time the long dimension is going to be horizontal, not vertical like it was with the regulatory signs. And I'd like to go into the sign requirements. And the MUTCD gives us a list of sign requirements that you see here, and I'm going to talk about how we meet these different requirements. The first sign requirement is there really needs to be a reason for that sign to be there. In this particular case, you can see this is a school bus stop ahead sign. It's an older school bus stop ahead sign. And when I said there needs to be a reason for it to be there, I retired from the Department of Highways a few years ago, and I remember we had a lot of school bus stop ahead signs, and quite a few of those were no longer needed. We'd gotten out of the habit of checking with the school bus garage to see if they were still necessary. Many times we had these signs up and there were no kids around whatsoever near these signs. So it could be very well that this sign is no longer needed. When a sign's not needed, we take it down because we want to avoid over signage. We want to use the sign whenever it's needed, but we don't want to put up too many. If we put up too many signs, the public can't pick out the really important ones, and they really start to lose some of their value. They start to ignore them. Sign requirement number 2 was to command attention. So we want to use standard signs, standard shapes, colors, put them in highly visible locations so that the public can see them and understand what we're trying to tell them. When I say standard size, in the MUTCD, you're going to find several charts which give you the size of sign that is required. And I'm showing you just a small part of the one for regulatory signs. There's also a chart for warning signs and a chart for guide signs. As you're looking at this, you'll notice that the top row says stop. That's talking about the stop sign, the octagonal stop sign, white letters on a red background. And you'll also notice it has conventional road and single lane and multi-lane conventional road. So this gives us a size of stop sign that we should be using. If I have a single lane road, then I'm going to use a 30 by 30 inch stop sign. If I have more than one lane in each direction, then I'm going to be using a 36 by 36 inch stop sign. That also applies to a multi-lane approach to a stop. So if I have a city street that has one lane each direction, and as I get close to the intersection where the stop condition is required and I add a right turn lane or a left turn lane, in that particular case, I'm going to have to upgrade to the 36 by 36. So you want to be careful and read all the rules, all the standards and the guidance for your sign selection. But before you put up a sign, make sure it can command people's attention by being the proper size. Another one is to make sure it's a standard sign following the standard colors and also the standard shapes. And in these, you're going to see symbols inside the sign, symbols or words. We want to use standard symbols and the standard word patterns that are in there. In this picture, you're seeing a yield sign that is blocked. And the more that bush grows, the more blocked that sign is going to be. So you want to make sure that your signs are placed where the public can see them. And once you put them there, you want to make sure that they can continue to see them all throughout the year. So we put them in the highest, most visible location, or the location with the highest visibility. We want to make sure and not hide them just over a hill crest. We don't want to put them where they're going to be blocked by vehicles. So signs that are put up for the public need to be the proper shape, color, size, and placed where they could be seen. So let's cover what are those proper heights. This comes out of the MUTCD, and it's showing you a couple of different situations. One is a rural area, the other is urban. And the heights of the sign are given. If you look at A in the top left, you will see that the height of a stop sign from the bottom of the sign to the near edge of the travelway or where the public is running is 5 feet. And that's the minimum. It can be higher than that, but that's going to be the minimum height for that sign. And we want to put it up there again where the public can see it. If you're talking about an urban area, so now we're in a city where you have perhaps pedestrians or vehicles parking, then that sign needs to be 7 feet from the bottom of the sign down to the top of the curb. And that allows the pedestrians to walk without getting their head hit on that sign or it impacting them in any way. And over here on D, if you look at the bottom right at D, you'll notice that there is a supplementary placard underneath the turn sign. It says 25 miles an hour. That supplementary placard can be up to 1 foot lower than the primary sign. So that means in a rural area, it can be at 4 feet. In a urban, it could be at 6. But if you do that, make sure that anything below 7 feet in the urban area is not sticking out any more than 4 inches into the pedestrian pathway so that it's not a problem for anyone walking down the sidewalk. This diagram also gives you the offsets from the edge of the sign to the where the traffic is. So let's take a rural area. From the edge of the stop sign to the edge of the road is going to be 12 feet or 6 feet if the shoulder is wider than 6 feet. And so that is 6 feet from the edge of the shoulder if it's wider than 6 feet, or 12 feet from the edge of where the traffic's running if you have less than a 6-foot shoulder. Now, I know a lot of your roadways, especially on county roads, you don't have that kind of room. You have a lot of vegetation, a lot of trees. So the MUTCD does go on to say that the minimum is 2 foot. What you're seeing here is desired a minimum of 2 feet. In an urban area, it starts off at 2 feet from the edge of the sign to the face of the curb. And then it goes on to say if you have a narrow utility strip, then that could come into as small as 1 foot. When we put our signs out on posts, we also need to be sure that our posts are crash-worthy. That means that they're breakaway, yielding, or shielded. You want to check to make sure wherever you go to in your signpost that they can provide you with an FHWA letter of acceptance showing that they're crash-worthy. And there's some guidance from the FHWA in a booklet called Maintenance of Signs and Sign Supports, which will give that information to you. The MUTCD also requires our signs, permanent signs, to be retro-reflective to show the same shape and color both day and night, either retro-reflective or illuminated. Illuminated means to be lit up by some artificial means. Imagine, if you will, some of the larger cities, we have the street name signs that are backlit. That would be illuminated. Otherwise, we're going to have some type of sheeted material that when the headlights hit it from a vehicle, it's going to bounce that light back. There's little microprisms on the sign sheeted material. It's going to bounce the light from the headlights back to the driver's eye. And we're required to make sure all of our signs are retro-reflective. In addition, there are some minimum levels of retro-reflectivity. And at this point, you're required to have a plan on how you're going to manage or assess those minimum levels of retro-reflectivity. Each city, each county, each state has to have that plan in place and be utilizing it. The reason that there's requirements for signs to be retro-reflective, again, is they're important to drivers. They need to be able to see them at night. The reason it's in the MUTCD is that for years we've allowed signs like this to still stay out there. If it wasn't for the shape, I couldn't tell you that this was a stop sign. The MUTCD also talks about grouping of signs. And most of the time, signs are going to be mounted on separate posts. There's only a few exceptions for mounting groups of signs together on the same post. So most time we're going to separate those. The reason for that is we want to allow the public time to see one sign, understand what it's telling them before they get to the next sign. Exceptions to things being on the same post is when one sign really is supplementing the other. They're both talking about the same thing. Guide signs that are grouped together. Those are the white on green signs, for example, white letters on a green background that might be giving the motorist information. Regulatory signs, talking about traffic laws or ordinances that don't conflict with each other. And then street name signs are allowed to be posted with a stop or a yield sign. I'll show you a couple of examples of these. This is a correct grouping of signs. You have the curve sign, the 35-mile-per-hour placard underneath it, and that's perfectly allowed. Those are talking about the same situation. Here's a stop sign with all-way underneath it. Traffic from left does not stop, or oncoming traffic does not stop. All of these are allowed because they're really talking about the same situation. What you want to avoid, though, is, again, getting your signs too close where the public really can't even tell what's going on. It's just sign overload, sign clutter. We want to avoid that whenever possible. Having signs on posts that really don't relate to each other whatsoever, you want to avoid that as well. And I talked about signs that aren't needed. And check out the stop sign on this photo with the traffic control signal. The MUTCD even goes on to say that we shall not put stop signs where we have traffic control signals. So that stop sign is definitely not needed. All right, sign requirement number 3 is to convey a clear, simple meaning. We achieve that with the shape, as we talked about, the size, and the color. So stop signs are white letters on a red background. Red's also used for yield, do not enter, wrong way. Well, we mentioned that a lot of the other regulatory signs, they're going to be black letters on a white background. Then we have our warning signs. We spoke about these as well. You have the school crossing sign, and this is pentagon shaped, but it's a black legend or black symbol on a fluorescent yellow-green background. Fluorescent yellow-green is a new color for schools. The circular black on yellow sign for railroad crossings. We have the diamond shaped with a yellow background for the warning sign. Temporary traffic control, you see on the right-hand side, is black on orange, is a standard color for those. And I covered the pentagon shape, the circular shape for the railroad crossing, the pennant shape for the no passing zone. And we want to make sure that we follow these. We want to use standard signs whenever possible. Now let's talk about symbols. Symbols in the MUTCD have to match what's in the MUTCD or that standard highway signs manual that I mentioned, or the state supplement if you have some in there. Some states like Colorado have added some, but any new symbols have to be approved by the FHWA, and I don't think they're going to be approving kangaroos for us. So the one you see in this photo would definitely be out, would not be a photo or a sign that we could use. Standard colors for guide signs are going to be white letters on a green background. We also mentioned white on brown or white on blue. And the photo on the bottom left, you're going to see street name signs. Now, street name signs have a few colors that they can use. They can use white on green, white on blue, white letters on a brown background, or black letters on a white background. And these have changed. If you notice in this photo, the first letter is capitalized, all the rest are lowercase. We now have a chart that gives us the size of this first letter. Might be 6 inches, 8 inches, etc. The remaining letters are going to be 3/4 the size of that. So if you're the person making these signs for your city or county, make sure you read that section so that you're meeting the new standards. The MUTCD also admonishes us to inspect our signs. Once we put it up, we want to make sure that it stays up and the public can see it. It says that we should have a schedule for doing inspections both day and night. We might need to clean that sign, we might need to straighten it, it might need replacing, and again, we might need to clear vegetation or brush out from around that sign. But we won't know that unless we look. So each city, county, and state needs to have their own schedule for when they're going to do these inspections. Sign requirement number 4. So remember, we've had fulfill a need, command attention, convey a clear, simple meaning. Number 4 is command respect. To get the public's respect, we need to use good quality signs and devices that meet the standards in the MUTCD, and that's exactly what is not happening in this photo. We have a detour that is set up. We have a detour that is set up here. They have a detour sign. They have road closed to through traffic. And this pitiful device here is trying to be a type 3 barricade. This is by no means how you would do this. And this is actually a recent photo. This was taken last summer in a large city. We should be using, for any road closures, type 3 barricades. They have 3 horizontal rails. The road closed to through traffic sign is actually a black on white sign and should be retro-reflective so it can be seen. So again, good quality signs meeting the standards so we can get the public's attention. And when we talk about that, commanding respect, I want to let you know that there is also that same requirement for our temporary traffic control signs. We have to be using good quality temporary traffic control signs to get people's respect. And that's really what the situation was that I showed you. That detour that was set up, that was temporary traffic control. As a matter of fact, there's a chapter in the MUTCD that talks specifically about temporary traffic control. That's part 6. If you go there, if you download that, you're going to find out that there are several 46 drawings, which are really simple traffic control plans. They're called typical applications. Here's an example of one. This is the one that would show you the typical flagger setup, TA10. This is showing you what might be a county road, it could be a city street. And if we're going to be working up here in the black and white cross-hatched area, that's where the work's taking place. If we're going to be working in this travel lane, we're going to have to close that lane. Well, this shows you how to close it. These orange circles are the cones that we're going to be using. The flagger are these flags with the ball on the end of it. We should have out 3 signs: road work, 1 lane road ahead, flagger ahead symbol sign. And most of the time, we're going to be using 2 flaggers for this. But you'll see a lot of those. Again, 46 of those drawings. Anytime we go out there and work on the roadway, we're supposed to be using part 6 for our traffic control. So I want to let you know that that is in there as well. Those flaggers are going to be required to wear a safety vest. And actually, anybody who's exposed to construction equipment or traffic is required to wear a safety vest. At least a class 2, type R class 2 safety vest for everybody. That's the one that you see in the bottom right photo. That's a type 2, has over 200 square inches of retro-reflective material. The one above it, a type 3, has over 300 square inches of retro-reflective material. That flagger is going to be recommended by the MUTCD and required by many states to upgrade to that class 3 at night. And you'd be safer if you could do it all the time. Class 3 again, so one at the top right with the sleeves in it. The signs that we use in our temporary traffic control, to get the respect of the user, they need to meet the standards. Diamond is the basic shape. We need to use black on orange. That's what you see. Unless it's incident management, they can also use black on fluorescent pink. And the size of the signs really depends on the kind of road that you're on. This says the size of the sign increases as speeds increase. Really, that's talking about the type of roads. When you look at the MUTCD, it's going to say that conventional roads, we're going to use 36 by 36 inch signs. That means city streets, county roads, 36 by 36. When we go to an expressway freeway, we're going to upgrade to the bigger sign, 48 by 48. Now, as a city and county, you might not have many or any of those. If you're listening to this as a DOT, you're going to have those. Those are talking about control of access. They're talking about either limited or fully controlled access. The interstate would be fully controlled access. You can only get onto it with ramps. The other one is talking about a multi-lane, so more than 1 lane, divided road around it could be an outer loop, maybe around a city that has higher speeds. And there we're going to be required to use the 48 by 48 inch signs. All of these, if we're going to use them at night, have to be retro-reflective. Now the permanent signs, they have to be retro-reflective day and night. But the temporary traffic control are required to be retroreflective at night by the MUTCD, and many states are going to require anybody working on a state route to upgrade to retroreflective day and night. Those cones that I showed you, the MUTCD is going to give us minimum sizes for those. And the minimum size MUTCD cone is 18 inches in height. But that is only, you have to read the footnotes, and it says it's only low speed, 40 miles per hour or less, and only during the daytime. Also, many state DOTs are going to say, nope, you can't use that on our road. So if you're listening with a city or a county, you're on your own streets or your own roads, you might use that smaller cone, or you would be able to and meet the minimum requirements. But when the speeds get higher, 45 miles per hour higher, or you're out there at night, then you got to use this cone that you see, the 28-inch tall cone with the 2 white retroreflective stripes on it. And my advice to you would be to buy just those cones, and that way you're safer even on those lower speed daytime city streets. Now, the 5th requirement is that we allow adequate time for proper response. Time for people to see it, realize that that sign is there, and then slow down appropriately. In the case of temporary traffic control, we're going to space our signs out based upon this chart. This comes out of part 6, and really it says we got to figure out, are we in the city, on a low-speed city street, a high-speed, or are we in a rural area, or is this a freeway expressway, that road that has some type of control of access? The drawing that we had for the typical flagger setup, you're seeing here, and we have the signs, road work, 1-lane road ahead, flagger ahead symbol sign. Up here is the flagger. They're separated by the letter codes A, B, and C. To figure out what those are, you would come down to this chart. And let's say that I was on a city street with a speed limit of 25, then I'm going to call that urban low speed. I'm going to go down to this row, and I'm going to see that it's 100 feet for A, B, and C. That means I'm going to have 100 feet here, 100 feet here, and 100 feet here. And in this case, the road work ahead sign would be 100 plus 100 plus 100, or 300 feet from the flagger. Now, those are approximate distances. You know, there is a little bit of room because you, again, want to make sure that sign is placed where it can do some good, where the public can actually see it. And there is a charts that tell us where to place our permanent signs too. If we have a warning sign that is up and installed, in this case on the right-hand side, you see an intersection warning sign. It needs to be put far enough away from that intersection that the public can understand that it's there and slow down. Now, the MUTCD has charts which give that to us. I won't go into great detail on the call, but on the webinar, but I will tell you that you look at whatever speed you're asking them to slow down to, and you compare that with the speed limit. On this chart, if the road that I showed you that had the intersection ahead was a 55 mile per hour road, then we would go to 55 miles an hour, and we would read across to the speed that we wanted people to decelerate to. In the case of the intersection ahead, you're warning them about the fact that somebody might pull out in front of them. They may have to lock it up. They might have to slow down all the way to 0. And if I'm going to slow down to 0, then that means I'm going to use the deceleration to the listed advisory speed of 0, this column. So on a 55 mile per hour roadway, that intersection ahead would need to go at least 325 feet from the intersection. And it could go further. There's room for moving that sign to get in the best location for it to be seen. But that's a little bit about how you use that chart. And that covers a pretty good look at introduction to the MUTCD and the items that you'll find there. In today's webinar, we talked about What is the MUTCD? When does it apply? How do you use it? Why do you use it? And we looked a little bit about the proper use and installation of signs. And I hope that you're able to take this information, download that MUTCD, and start using it to uh, improve safety on your roadways. We appreciate you watching. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Our website is there at the bottom.